Welcome to Guide Mia. Today we're going to talk about roles, every role a Cympha account can have, what each one can do, and how people actually get them. This is a reference lecture, a guided tour rather than a step-by-step. It's for lab managers deciding who on the team gets which role, for staff wondering how to join a lab, and for anyone who's ever asked why a case landed, or didn't land, in their queue. We'll take the roles one at a time, in order: the placeholder role first, then the clinical side, then the lab side from the manager down to the shipping desk, then the two roles that live outside a lab entirely. For each one I'll tell you who it's for, what it can do, and where it lands after sign-in. Then we'll finish with three things the written doc puts in tables: the pending role placeholders, the permission matrix, and the status to role mapping. Listen through once, and keep the written matrix as your lookup afterwards. The whole role model fits in one sentence. Every Cympha account has exactly one role, and that role decides three things: which app shell you see after sign-in, which case statuses you can hold, and what actions you can take on a case. Everything else in this lecture is detail hanging off that sentence. Cympha defines 13 roles in total, plus 7 pending variants used while a lab-affiliated role waits for a lab manager's approval. We'll get to those near the end. Notice what one role per account implies. Nobody is simultaneously a designer and a clinician on the same account. If you genuinely work both sides, you hold two accounts. And when a case sits at a given status, exactly one kind of person can be holding it. That constraint is precisely what makes case routing predictable rather than a matter of who noticed first. So how does an account get its role? A brand new account starts with no role at all. On first sign-in you land on the Select Your Role screen, a set of role cards grouped into three families: clinical, lab, and partner. You pick one card, and here's the part to take seriously. Once set, a role cannot be changed from your own account. There's no settings page where you switch from designer to intaker. Choose deliberately, and if you're advising a new team member, tell them what to pick before they sign up rather than after. 2 labeling notes while we're on this screen. The doctor-facing card is labeled clinical, so if you're a dentist looking for a card that says dentist or doctor, clinical is the one you want. And one role you will never find here at all is patient. Patients exist only by invitation from their doctor, they never sign themselves up, and we'll come back to why at the end of the tour. Let's start the tour with a role that isn't quite a job: visitor. A visitor is a real placeholder role on a registered account, somebody who is signed up but hasn't committed to a working role yet. The most common way to become one is the partner card. Picking partner at role selection registers you as a visitor while your partner application is processed. What can a visitor do? Sign in, and use a minimal navigation. They land on a minimal dashboard. That's the extent of it. There's no queue, no cases, no team. But visitor carries one privilege nothing else has, and it's worth remembering: visitor is the one role that can still be upgraded later. Every other role in this lecture is set once and permanent. So if somebody in your organization genuinely doesn't yet know what they'll be doing on Cympha, visitor is the honest place to park them. Now the clinical side of the fence, and the role most Cympha accounts have. Clinical is the doctor-facing role, a dentist, an orthodontist, or any external case submitter. It's the role for "I'm here to send work to a lab." What can a clinician do? Create cases on the new case page and submit them to a lab. Review deliverables on the approval page when the lab asks for sign-off, and that review carries the 3 actions we know from the status ladder: approve the design, request changes, or escalate to the lab manager. They can share a case read-only with a colleague, which is how a second opinion happens without handing over an account. And on aligner cases they can share a plan with a patient, which is the flow that creates patient accounts in the first place. After sign-in, a clinician lands on the customer dashboard. If you've watched the status glossary lecture, this is the role that holds the case at awaiting approval. Every review moment on the ladder belongs to clinical. On the lab side, everything anchors to the lab manager, the owner or primary operator, and the first user at any new lab. The list of powers is long because this role is the hub. They complete the lab onboarding wizard. They manage the lab's profile and its services for my lab. They approve pending team member requests on my team. They see every case in the queue, assign cases, and override status when something needs a manual push. They handle escalations. When a clinician escalates, the case routes to this role specifically. And they're the expected holder for submitted cases arriving at the lab, and for shipping. After sign-in they land straight on the queue, which tells you what the job is. 2 structural facts worth noting. Each lab has exactly one lab manager for case routing purposes, one desk where the buck stops. And lab managers activate immediately when they pick the role. There's no approval gate, the confirmation dialog says your lab account is ready, and the next step is setting up the lab. Next, the bench where the work actually happens. Designer is a human designer working in the lab, and it's the most common lab side role after lab manager. A designer receives case assignments and holds cases at designing. When a deliverable is ready they request approval, which flips the case to awaiting approval and puts it in the clinician's court. They also hold approved cases briefly, before the auto advance moves those cases onward. And one more thing that matters for your day: designers are the holder when a customer requests changes on a deliverable they built. The rework comes back to the person who did the original work, not to whoever is free. Where do they land after sign-in? My assignments. a page whose own subtitle is Cases Assigned to You for Processing, with a patient name, search, and a status filter. That's a working queue for one person, not the lab-wide view the manager sees. AlignerBot is the designer's automated twin. Mechanically, it is a designer class role. It receives aligner case assignments, holds cases at designing, and lands in the same designer shell as a human designer. The difference is how the work gets done, through the paired desktop agent rather than by hand. That's why an AlignerBot seat belongs to a person on your team even though the designing is automated. Somebody's account owns the workstation. The other thing to know is that it's a licensed automation seat, not simply another card on the role screen. Choosing AlignerBot at role selection goes through a subscription prompt, and if you decline that prompt, the account is registered as a plain designer instead. So if a team member reports that they picked AlignerBot but ended up a designer, that's what happened, they dismiss the subscription step. There's a separate lecture on setting up AlignerBot for a lab end-to-end if that's the path you're on. Case intaker is the first of two specialist roles that bracket the design work. This one sits before it, a pre-designed quality control role, someone who checks the scans, the CBCT, the completeness of the prescription, and the patient demographics before a case ever enters a designer's queue. The idea is to catch a thin submission at the door rather than halfway through a design. They hold cases at intake review, and they work from the intake queue, which is a filtered view of the lab's main queue. Now the structural point, and it's the one to remember: a lab without any case intaker skips intake review entirely. Submitted cases go straight to designing. That is by design, not a misconfiguration. Not every lab needs an intake step, and rather than forcing an empty stage into the ladder, Cympha simply routes around it. Add an intaker later and the step appears. The second specialist sits after design, the manufacturing engineer, the person responsible for physical fabrication, printing, milling, and finishing. They hold cases in manufacturing, and they land on the manufacturing queue after sign-in. There's one timing detail attached to this role that catches new labs out, and it's worth saying plainly. On a physical, lab service case, once the doctor approves the design, the case does not jump into manufacturing by itself. It waits at approved until the lab moves it to in manufacturing. That's a deliberate manual step, and the reason is scheduling. The lab controls its own production queue, so an approval that arrives on a Friday evening doesn't start a print run nobody is there to watch. If you're a manufacturing engineer wondering why an approved case hasn't reached you, that pause is the answer, and someone lab side has to release it. Two quieter roles round out the lab side. The first is lab admin, a senior lab staff member who needs visibility across the lab's work without being in the case routing rotation. Think of a production supervisor, or an owner who isn't hands-on anymore. A lab admin can see the lab's case queue, and that is genuinely the extent of it. They're lab staff observers. The important consequence is what they are not. A lab admin does not appear as the expected holder for any case status, so cases are never automatically routed to them. Case assignment and lab configuration remain the lab manager's actions. They land on the queue after sign-in, same as the manager, but they're reading it rather than working it. If someone on your team needs to watch everything and be handed nothing, this is precisely their role, and it's the only role that fits that description. The other quiet role is operational: shipping clerks, lab coordinators, the people who handle the physical world between manufacturing and the courier. Their case power is narrow and specific. They hold shipping cases, alongside the lab manager. That shared holder is deliberate, and it mirrors how labs really run. In a small lab the manager takes the parcel to the post office, and in a bigger one there's a desk that does nothing else. Operational users land on the queue after sign-in. It's a small role, and that's the point. A growing lab can give the person who packs boxes exactly the access that job needs, and no more. That's the theme running through the whole lab side. Actually, you add roles as the work demands them, and each one is narrow enough that nobody carries permissions they never use. Two roles live outside both the clinic and the lab. The first is the DSO manager, the manager of a group of clinics, or a distributor supporting a group of doctors. The defining trait is oversight without interference. A DSO manager sees every case submitted by the doctors in their group, but strictly read-only, no action buttons on any case, and no case operation accepts the role at all. Their real workspace is My Doctors, where they manage the group, invite a doctor by email, and note the doctor must already have a Cympha account and must accept, approve or reject doctors who ask to join, and remove doctors. A doctor can also leave the group unilaterally, at any time. Their shell is minimal: a dashboard with exactly two navigation items, Dashboard and My Doctors. And two structural notes. DSO membership is independent of lab membership, the two have nothing to do with each other. And this is the only join flow in Cympha that works in both directions: the doctor can request, or the DSO can invite. Every other join in the product runs one way only. And the most restricted role of all: patient. A patient is an end patient whose doctor shared a treatment plan with them through the share-to-patient flow on an aligner case. It's a restricted role with no general Cympha front end, and it exists only by invitation. It never appears on role selection, which is why you didn't see it back at the start of the tour. What a patient can do is deliberately tiny. They land on a page that is Chrome-less, no navigation, no menus, listing the files their doctor has shared with them. They can click 1 to open the Cympha Studio viewer and see their plan in 3 dimensions. And if their doctor runs ortho monitoring, they can send photo rounds back through the camera flow. That is the entire surface, no case folder, no other patients, no editing tools, no settings. If you're a clinician curious what your patients actually experience, there are 2 patient-facing lectures in this series that walk that experience end to end. Now the flow that surprises everyone. Designers, case intakers, manufacturing engineers, lab admins, operational users, and AlignerBot operators don't simply claim their roles, and, just as importantly, the lab cannot invite them either. There is no invite button anywhere in Cympha for adding a team member. The direction of travel always runs from the staff member to the lab, the staff member requests, and the lab manager approves. Here's the sequence. The new user signs up at app.cympha.com. On the Select Your Role screen they pick the lab side role they want, designer, say. They enter their lab manager's email and look them up. The manager must already have a Cympha account, and if the email isn't found the app says so and asks the staff member to have their manager sign up first. Their account is then created in a pending role, and a request lands on the lab manager's My Team page under Approval Requests. The manager opens My Team, sees the pending row, and clicks Approve. The user's role flips from pending to real, and on their next page load they get the lab side shell. Let's spend a moment on the pending state itself, because it's a real place your account sits, sometimes for a day. 6 lab side roles have a pending placeholder: designer, case intaker, lab admin, manufacturing engineer, operational, and AlignerBot. Each has its own pending version, and while you're in it, you have no lab side access whatsoever. You can sign in, but the queue and the assignments aren't there yet. That's not a bug and it's not a partial permission. A pending role is a waiting room. 2 exceptions to the whole flow: lab managers and DSO managers activate immediately when they pick their role, with no approval step at all, because there's nobody above them to approve it. And if the request went to the wrong lab, or the staff member simply changes their mind, they don't need anybody's help to undo it. The pending screen offers cancel request and resubmit, which returns them to role selection to pick a different lab, or a different role. The written doc lays all of this out as a permission matrix, and it's worth reading across a few rows out loud, because the shape of it is instructive. Submitting a case and approving a design are clinicals alone, no lab side role does either, which is exactly why an approval can never be self-served by the lab. Triaging the queue belongs to the lab manager. A lab admin gets view-only visibility of the same queue, and the working roles, designer, AlignerBot, case intaker, manufacturing engineer, see only the cases assigned to them. That's the difference between the words own and view in the matrix. Own means your own assignments, view means read-only across the lab. Designing is the designers, with AlignerBot doing the same work through the agent. Manufacturing is the engineers. Shipping belongs to operational users and the lab manager. And approving team requests is the lab managers alone. 2 roles have no case actions at all: the DSO manager, who sees their doctor's cases read-only, and the patient. Read the matrix that way, by column rather than by row, and you can see at a glance that every capability in Cympha has exactly one owner, and everyone else is either watching or waiting. Let's close by connecting roles back to statuses, because this is where the queue question finally gets answered: why did that case land, or not land, with me? For status-driven assignment to put a case somewhere, the lab needs at least 1 user in that status's expected role. Submitted expects the lab manager, and so does escalated. Intake review expects a case intaker. Designing expects a designer or an AlignerBot seat. Awaiting approval belongs to the customer, that's outside the lab entirely. A changes requested case goes back to the previous lab worker, whoever built the deliverable. Approved can rest with a designer, an AlignerBot seat, or a manufacturing engineer, depending on the case. In manufacturing expects the manufacturing engineer, and shipping expects the lab manager or an operational user. Now the reassuring part: a smaller lab can get away with just a lab manager and a designer. The intake step is simply skipped. Digital deliveries never need a manufacturing engineer at all, and without one the physical manufacturing track doesn't appear in the lab's workflow at all. The latter shrinks to fit the team you actually have. You add roles when the work demands them, not before. So that's the whole taxonomy: role by role. Visitor waits, clinical submits and approves, the lab manager anchors the lab, designers and AlignerBot seats do the work, intakers and engineers bracket it, lab admins watch and operational ships, the DSO manager oversees doctors from outside the lab entirely, and patients see exactly the plan their doctor shared, and nothing else. Joining a lab always runs the same direction: staff request, manager approves, and until that approval lands, the account sits pending with no access. When you're setting up a team, the whole decision really reduces to one question asked once per seat: which statuses should this person be able to hold? Answer that, and the role picks itself. The full written matrix, including the role-by-role permission table, the pending role mapping, and the status-to-role list, is at cympha.com, in the Docs section, under Role Taxonomy and Permission Matrix. Pair it with the Case Status Glossary lecture and the whole routing system snaps into focus. We're walking through every Cympha workflow, one lecture at a time. Subscribe to follow along. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.